This morning, it was a deal. By midday, it was a process with delicate negotiations ahead. You've heard of the fog of war. Where Ukraine is concerned, this might be the fog of peace. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear has a warning for fellow Democrats. Recent election victories, though satisfying, aren't enough. What's missing? He will tell us. One lawmaker calls it Animal House. Decent movie, but apt description for the House of Representatives? Virginia Congressman Don Beyer has a review of recent House antics. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Russia started all the killing in Ukraine. It didn't have to, but it did. More than 10,000 Ukrainian civilians have died as a result. The number of Ukrainian military wounded and dead, many multiples of that. Infrastructure across Ukraine is destroyed or in some state of barely functioning rubble. Evidence of Russian war crimes, substantial. Russian war dead and wounded total by many accounts more than 1 million, yet Russia's territorial gains are a fraction of what they imagined when they invaded in February 2022. Ukraine, though heavily battered, is willing to fight on, but the prospect of ejecting the Russian army, always dim, has grown a bit more bleak in this, the fourth winter of war. That, then, is the backdrop for an aggressive White House push to end this conflict. The Ukrainians are managing to absorb that pressure as best they can and have redrafted, quite probably with the assistance of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, what was presented to them last week. And this morning dawned with a U.S. official saying the Ukrainians had signed on to a deal. Then the White House said not quite, that there were delicate details, that's a quote, still to be worked out. Late this afternoon, the president posted on social media that negotiations with Moscow and Kyiv were intensifying, and with that, the very real possibility of an agreement sufficiently detailed to warrant a summit of some kind between Trump, Russian President Putin, and Ukrainian President Zelensky. Moscow today, though, has been largely silent, a potentially ominous sign. This initiative, in other words, could smash, metaphorically, on the rocks of Russian diplomatic intransigence. But the White House is pressing. What is unclear is how hard and in how many directions. Kyiv has felt the pressure. Is Moscow? Joining us now from the White House, Jennifer Jacobs. Jennifer, this story moves by the hour. What can you tell us?
The president is telling us tonight that there are very few disagreements that are still in place, that there is positive forward movement, that they haven't fully reached everything, but that they are working on a final plan. So the president is dispatching one top advisor over to Moscow to go meet with President Putin over in Moscow, and that's Steve Witkoff, his special envoy, Steve Witkoff. And then he's sending another advisor, Dan Driscoll. That's the Secretary of the Army, who's a good friend of J.D. Vance. They went to Yale Law School together. Dan Driscoll is Secretary of the Army, a very insider advisor to this White House. So they're sending him to go meet with the Ukrainians, and that's where the latest is on that front.
And the point about Moscow's relative silence today should be considered seriously, in that if Moscow doesn't agree and the Ukrainians do, we still don't have a deal.
Right. So Steve Witkoff is the most inner circle of them all. The president has signaled today that the people who are key advisors to this are the Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, J.D. Vance, and then you've got Marco Rubio. Now, the Ukrainians would like to send President Zelensky here to meet with President Trump, including this week during the Thanksgiving holidays. The president is telling us tonight that he doesn't want to do that. Zelensky wants to have a face-to-face with President Trump to make sure that this deal isn't too slanted. And the president is saying absolutely not meeting with with Putin or Zelensky until you guys have a final deal to end this war.
Jennifer Jacobs, North Lawn of the White House, thank you so very much. Joining me now, former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. Ambassador Taylor, you've been with us many times. Help my audience understand where we are right now, how to read the various tea leaves and representations going on.
Major, I think you've said it out right. That is, the Americans and the Ukrainians and the Europeans and probably the Brits seem to be aligned.
Okay.
They seem to be on board with this new proposal. This is a rejection of that 28-point proposal that was clearly written by the Russians and leaked by the Russians.
And lopsidedly advantageous.
Lopsidedly advantageous to the Russians. Zero surprise. So this one is much better. It took input, and I think you said it right. Secretary Rubio, National Security Advisor Rubio, pulled in input from the Ukrainians for the first time, seriously, and the Europeans. And it's come up with a shorter, smaller one, 18 or 19 points that are much better focused and much more likely to succeed.
So this 28 plan, advantageous to the Russians, was done in cooperation with Steve Witkoff and the Russian government. Steve Witkoff's going back to Moscow. What does that mean?
One hopes that Secretary Rubio has been able to corral the various pieces, and one hopes that both Witkoff and Driscoll, the Army Secretary, are now on board with this 19-point proposal, and that Witkoff is taking that 19-point proposal that's almost agreed by the Ukrainians and supported by the Europeans to Moscow to see if he can get. I hope he'll be pushing his buddy Putin to agree.
And it's clear to you, Ambassador Taylor, that what the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, we should remind ourselves Marco Rubio has both jobs, achieved here is not done freelancing. He is not working outside of the authority of the president. The president is clearly okay with it because this is where the negotiations now stand. So that revision, engineered quite probably by the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State, has to be at some level reflective of what Trump is okay with.
I would assume so, too.
And Putin better assume that.
And Putin should assume that as well. And I'm sure that Witkoff will make that clear to Putin.
Okay.
That he needs to, this is the proposal, and can you sign on?
Do you, based on your interactions with the Russians, have any expectation that we're going to get a definitive answer anytime soon?
No. Putin is not interested in this. He's not interested in ending this war.
And he's interested in playing for time, as he always has been.
He's playing for time. He grinds through both Russian soldiers as well as the front line, making little progress, very little progress, losing 1,000 soldiers a day. So he doesn't care about that. He is after Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. And the president raised the prospect of, if this deal is sufficiently detailed and finalized, we might have all three of them together. That certainly sounds aspirational at this moment. Sounds aspirational.
It does. The Europeans are going to be interested in that kind of a meeting. The Europeans will like to join that. They would like to be there, too. They've got a lot at stake. They've got a lot at stake. They're paying a lot of the bills. Their security is right on the line. If the Russians keep coming, they're threatened. So the Europeans would like to be there. They've got strong views about this.
Let's go back to a record you and I play frequently on this show, which is the "What about sanctions against Russia" record. It's still there. It's ready to be, the needle can be laid right upon it by the President of the United States. Is that still part of the backdrop for the conversations Witkoff has to have with Putin?
It has to be. It has to be. There needs to be pressure on Putin. Right now, there's not. There's some pressure. I mean, the president, to his credit, put the sanctions on the top two Russian oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, and they provide a lot of the income, of the revenue.
And there are some data, I always confuse that, indicating some softening of the Russian economy, which is an underlying pressure point that Putin cannot ignore forever.
Absolutely right. It is softening. And the revenues, which is the key thing. You're trying to squeeze off revenues that the Russians get from the sale of oil and gas to fund the war. And if they can squeeze that down, that's more pressure on Putin. But it's in addition to the sanctions, you need the weapons. So President Trump, if he really wants to put pressure on Putin to come to the table, if Witkoff should have this in his pocket, can give the Ukrainians tomahawks.
Give my audience a way to process whatever comes at them in terms of headlines the next 48 hours.
One question is going to be, will President Trump meet with President Zelensky? Sounds like he's saying he wants to wait until this is farther down the line, that it's more cooked before he actually meets with him. But it is going to be very important to see what Witkoff puts pressure, what kind of pressure he puts on.
Meaning, what does Witkoff say in the aftermath of that meeting, and what does Putin in Moscow say after that?
Exactly right.
Ambassador William Taylor, always brilliant. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Major.
The FBI's counterterrorism division is planning to interview the 6 Democratic lawmakers who posted a video last week reminding members of the intelligence community and the U.S. military that they are allowed to, and in fact obligated to, refuse any illegal order. Here's reaction from one of those 6 lawmakers, Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
Last night, the Counterterrorism Division at the FBI sent a note to the members of Congress saying they are opening what appears to be an inquiry against the 6 of us. To be honest, the president's reaction and the use of the FBI against us is exactly why we made the video.
Nicole Sganga joins me now to discuss all this. Nicole, what is the FBI's actual jurisdictional role here?
Yeah, Major, to set the table, and it is Thanksgiving week after all, the DOJ and FBI are exploring any wrongdoing on the part of these 6 lawmakers. Now, this all stems from that 90-second video, but in recent days, we've heard President Trump and Secretary Hegseth label the lawmakers' conduct as sedition. The FBI opens inquiries into potential criminal behavior every single day, but here's why the FBI's involvement here is a little bit confusing, Major. There's no federal crime called seditious behavior. The phrase has really no legal meaning. The closest federal statute, seditious conspiracy, 18 U.S. Code 2384, requires use of force or a conspiracy to levy war against the United States. Now, if that sounds familiar, after January 6th, our viewers might remember that DOJ charged Oath Keepers and members of the Proud Boys with seditious conspiracy for then allegedly orchestrating violent attempts to stop the transfer of presidential power. But if we're going through our legal checklist here, we need an agreement of 2 or more people that conspired and agreed with one another, use of force, not just speech or political pressure, an unlawful objective like overthrowing or destroying the U.S. government. And so far, the conduct that was described in the lawmakers' videos doesn't meet those elements, at least on its face. So it's unclear what charges might actually be involved. Also, Major, it is a distraction from the bigger picture, which is the questions about, are these strikes on drug boats legally justified? Is the U.S. legitimately in an armed conflict with drug traffickers? And is use of force here lawful, where there's perhaps no imminent threat to the United States, though some in the administration would argue there is that threat and would point you to drug deaths?
And Nicole, with everything you just said, there's also a couple of things we should remind our audience about. There's a First Amendment protection. There's also a speech and debate clause protection from every lawmaker that shields them from certainly civil and criminal inquiries. So again, what the FBI has in front of it is a sort of edict that comes from the Justice Department or the White House, possibly both, but not much of a roadmap to pursue.
That's exactly right, Major. And the criticism, which has been a constant within the Department of Justice and especially under this administration, is that the administration is weaponizing the Department of Justice for its own political means. Now, in the meantime, we're hearing from all of these lawmakers that have contacted U.S. Capitol Police. They've filed complaints about, threats, concerns about their own personal safety and the safety of their offices, their staff. We've heard from the lawmakers who say their offices have received thousands of calls, emails. Pennsylvania Representative Chrissy Houlihan, who was one of these lawmakers, said 2 of her district offices have received bomb threats, and at least 2 of the lawmakers here, Jason Crow and Chris DeLuzio, have requested that U.S. Capitol Police investigate what they call intimidating, threatening, and concerning posts made by the president. Now, on Friday, we heard President Trump sort of backpedal in an interview on Fox News, denied he was threatening lawmakers, but he maintained that they had broken the law, and he continued to speak very loudly, accusing them of what he calls sedition, Major.
Nicole Sganga, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next on the Takeout, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, his take on the Democratic Party's future and his own in 2028. You see the governor right there. There was a bit of a censure cyclone in the House last week. A bipartisan group of lawmakers is now trying to slow down these votes and the formal rebukes behind them. Virginia Democratic Congressman Don Beyer joins us to explain. Language, as we all know, is more than words. It's gestures, expressions, graffiti, even murmurs. It's a subculture all its own, and we meet the author who has created an illustrated dictionary of what he calls Significa. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back. Affordability is not enough. That warning comes to Democrats from Kentucky's Democratic governor, Andy Beshear. He argues something is disappearing in America. Belief in the American dream. Also disappearing, a common language, he argues. And he says Democrats have to fess up about their part in both of these situations. The governor joins me now. Governor, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Let me just take two issues that President Trump hammers all the time, immigration and crime. Do you believe your party nationally has an Achilles heel with both?
I don't, but I do think our party needs to be one where border security is viewed as national security, but the way in which we enforce our immigration laws shows our humanity. We are not a party, nor are we a country where people pull up in armored Humvees in the middle of the night, jump out in masks, wrestle somebody to the ground, and have them potentially in another state before they even begin to ask questions. Public safety, look at the work that we actually put in. You know, Donald Trump wants to do the stunt. He wants to send National Guard that isn't going to make you safer a week or a month from now. And what he does is cut back on the grants that help us to pay our police officers more, to reduce recidivism, to intervene with youth. Those are the types of ways that we actually move things forward. But my belief is the way we truly do this is to remember that public safety, how you feel in your community, isn't a Democrat or a Republican thing. It's something we're all supposed to work on together.
Do you think one problem in America, Governor, is that we have a thriving American dream in urban America and a dying American dream in rural America?
Oh, I think the American dream is under fire in all parts of our country, and that should concern us. I mean, the American dream, the belief that if we work hard and we follow the rules that we can get ahead, has propelled this country to great heights. Yet today, right now, folks are struggling to afford paying groceries at the end of the month, and they can't take their kids on that same vacation that they grew up going on. Young couples can't buy a house, and it looks like it might be a decade longer than it was for their parents before they have the opportunity to. Costs keep going up, whether it's for car insurance in Nevada or on other goods in other places in our country. The Democratic Party has to be the party that says, we see you, America. We understand that you care about your job and whether you can support your family, your next doctor's appointment, the roads and bridges you drive, the school you drop your kids off at, and whether you feel safe in your community, and we're going to live right there. We're going to make your life a little bit better, a little bit easier, and we are going to reignite that American dream so that you've got hope for a better life, and so that my kids and everyone else's can grow up in a country similar to the one we enjoyed.
Governor, you've recently written that Democratic language is defective. What's defective about it?
Well, for far too long, advocacy speak, which was meant for the right reasons. It was meant to reduce stigma, but you don't change stigma by changing words. You change stigma by changing hearts. And it infiltrated our language to where we sounded more professorial, like we were talking at people instead of talking to people, or sometimes like we were talking down to people. And it takes the meaning out of words. I'll give you an example. Kentucky was hit by the opioid epidemic harder than just about anywhere else. We've all lost a dozen or so people that we love and care about that were taken far too soon, but none of us lost those individuals to substance use disorder. We lost them to addiction, and when you hear it, it's mean, it's nasty, it kills people we love, or when someone triumphs over it, they deserve credit for going up against that challenge and coming out on the other side. And right now, people want authenticity. They want their leaders to be passionate, but also normal. And to be normal, we've got to talk to people like we're normal.
Meaning get rid of food insecurity.
Yes. I mean, who gets an emotional reaction from food insecurity? Like, that big, ugly bill is going to do more to make people go hungry than anything I've seen in my lifetime. Look at the president refusing to fund SNAP in the middle of the government shutdown, the first president ever. What was that resulting in? Seniors not being able to sleep because they're hungry. Kids not being able to focus in the classroom because they're hungry. Not because they're food insecure, but because their stomach hurts and the rest of their body is reacting to it. You know, the American people expect us to fight for them, and so we've got to make sure we're using the type of language that conveys how committed we are. And I know for me and for my fellow Democratic governors, we are committed to making life a little bit better for all our people.
Governor, you're soon to take the helm of the Democratic Governors Association. My first presidential campaign as a reporter was 1992. You might remember the eventual nominee of the Democratic Party was a gentleman named Bill Clinton, who rode the Democratic Governors Association, among many other assignments, to prominence within the Democratic Party. So with that as a backdrop, what are your intentions in 2028?
He was a Southern governor. Right now, I'm trying to speak reason into the chaos that we see around our country, to be a common ground, common sense, get things done type of voice, not just for the Democratic Party, but I'd love to pull everybody into at least starting our conversations there. As you mentioned, about a week and a half, I take over the Democratic Governors Association, and my goal is to change the map, to elect Democratic governors in places that you don't expect. And listen, I won in a state that Donald Trump won by 30, a Democrat with about a 64 to a 68% approval rating. So I feel like I have something to add to this conversation, hopefully to lift up candidates in places like Iowa and Georgia to make sure we win. And Governor, after a successful
That's my very point, because what Bill Clinton said at the time sounds very much like what you're saying now. I have a different approach, the approach that many in the party that might be more influential in the nominating process has failed, and I want to skip that nominating process or redirect it so I can win in a general. That's what you sound like to me.
Well, when we get done with 2026, ensuring that more Americans have Democratic leadership, because when Democrats win, we do what Republicans can't. We govern well. After that, I'll sit down with my family. What's most important to me is that we heal this country. I don't want my kids growing up in a world where everything is us versus them, where everything's viewed through a lens that's D versus R, where you're told you should dislike your neighbor or they are the enemy from within simply because they registered when they were 18 with a different letter behind their name. So that's what we'll look at. Am I that candidate that can help heal this country, or is someone else? Because I'll tell you, I will always put the United States of America and trying to ensure it's that same stable, wonderful country that I enjoyed as a child, making sure that my children and everyone else's get to see that same country.
Governor, before I let you go, what will befall, if anything, the Commonwealth of Kentucky if Obamacare expanded tax credits expire at the end of this year?
Oh, it's going to be devastating, and it's devastation on top of devastation. So the big, ugly bill that's already passed is going to gut rural health care and rural economies. We got 35 rural hospitals that may close. Each is the largest payroll in their community. That closes, and you got to drive 2 hours to see a doctor. Oh, and it's not just the hospital that closes. It's the local restaurant, coffee shop, bank, and insurance agency, because all those dollars are no longer in the economy, and all those professionals had to move somewhere else. Now, take healthcare costing more for people on the exchange who are buying that private insurance that actually pays those rural hospitals a little bit more than Medicaid patients. Now you take all that out of that hospital, and they have no choice but to close or to cut a lot of those lines. So this isn't just impacting healthcare, which is a basic human right. This is going to hammer the economy in profound and difficult ways. It's the worst piece of legislation in my lifetime, the big ugly bill, and the fact that congressional Republicans would pass a bill to extend a tax cut for the wealthy, but not a tax credit for working Americans trying to afford health care, shows exactly where they are right now.
Kentucky Governor, Democrat, Andy Beshear. Governor, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Virginia Democratic Congressman Don Beyer joins me next to explain the sudden spasm of censure motions in the House. Why is everyone so angry and eager to punish? We'll talk about that next. Welcome back. Okay, last week the House came back to work after 7 weeks away. What did it do? Well, it spent a lot of time debating and voting on censure resolutions. 3, in fact. 1 succeeded, 2 failed. Here's some history. Since 1832, only 28 members of the House have been censured. 5 of those censures have happened since 2021. So you can detect there's kind of a trend going on here. One lawmaker called last week's antics playground nonsense. Virginia Democratic Congressman Don Beyer wants to stop or at least slow down this censure mania, and he joins me now. So, Don, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining me. What do
Thank you,
think,
Major, very much.
Don, what do you think the root cause of this censure mania is? What's going on?
But part of it, Major, it's so divided right now that, we're in a zero-sum game. The House is so close right now, 4 or 5 votes, that, power can shift back and forth. So everyone's very focused on what's going to happen in the next election. So any chance to make the other side look bad, they're going to seize.
And is there a way, do you think, procedurally to slow this down?
I hope so. I mean, what we've done for many years now is do it on a simple 50-50 basis. That means that the majority can punish the minority sort of at will. And we've both done it in each direction. We punished the congressman from Arizona a few years ago for doing a cartoon about AOC, and then they turned around and punished a member of Congress from Minnesota for talking about from the river to the sea, and it just went back and forth. And then I think, Major, they said there are 6 censures in the whole 20th century, and we've had that last week.
Right. And so how do you want to change the rules?
Well, instead of just 50-50, the motion was to move it to 60% for censure, for expulsion, for anything like that, so that it actually has to be bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans have to agree that what you did was a terrible thing. And by the way, there is a whole ethics committee. It's always very secret. I think it's 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans. They work in the shadows to make sure that people are held accountable. So there's a process for somebody that does something wrong. And we can often wait till the ethics report comes back out and tells us what should be done.
And Don, it's been my experience in politics that whatever happens in Washington does not happen in isolation. It is reflective of whatever mood is going through the American electorate writ large. So if members are angry and willing or eager to point fingers, censure, blame, shift, or whatever, that's because there's some sort of energy out there that drives them in that direction. There's a reflection going on here, is there not?
Yeah, there is. And just to pick up on something that Governor Beshear just talked about, I think he's right that we have never been more divided, at least in our lifetimes, maybe the Civil War. But in my lifetime, people are angry, people are left out. And I'm very much looking forward to our next president who can make the centerpiece of his or her leadership is bringing us together. I'm part of this cool little new nonprofit called the American Identity Project, trying to figure out if we have 2 different sets of history, 2 different sets of who we are, it makes it very difficult to get along. If we can go back to when I was a child and we all sort of understood that we were on the same team.
Now, I want to shift the focus for a second while I have you. You're a Northern Virginia representative. Your constituents are, in some cases, slightly more aligned with the federal government than other members of the House. How optimistic or pessimistic are you that come the end of January 2026, we will avoid another government shutdown?
Well, I'm optimistic that we'll avoid another shutdown because I think we discovered this last shutdown didn't accomplish much. The only thing it really did was bring everyone's attention to the crisis around the healthcare premiums. But in the meantime, we don't need to do that again because it's showing up in our paychecks right away. These are rolling out all across the country what the premium increases are going to be like. So from the beginning, I've said we're trying to save the Republicans from the bad parts of the big ugly bill. And the worst part is the failure to renew these tax credits for healthcare. And I think we've got to come together in a bipartisan way to do that.
Do you think that there's any possibility, Don Beyer, Democrat from Virginia, that a discharge petition on extending Obamacare subsidies could find the 218 votes? The Republican leadership has made it clear to the White House they're not interested in engaging on that. Can you engage on it similar to the way the House did on Epstein files?
Yes, and Major, we've been doing this again and again now. Once again, a discharge petition was something that happened once a decade, perhaps, and now they're becoming once every month. And there are a bunch of Republicans, more moderate, that understand that if they don't take care of these healthcare premiums, they're toast in those elections 49 weeks from today. There are people that just hate the Affordable Care Act. I respect that, but they haven't come up with an alternative in these last 15 years. In the meantime, if they want to come up with an alternative, let's make sure we hold the people harmless until that plan is ready.
Virginia Democratic Congressman Don Beyer. Congressman, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Major.
The White House has been backpedaling today about Ukraine and peace. It was a deal, then it wasn't. Our political panel joins us to try to navigate this murky diplo-speak. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Here is a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. West Virginia Republican Senator Jim Justice has agreed to pay $5 million in back taxes. That agreement came shortly after the Internal Revenue Service filed suit. In October, the IRS issued a lien against Justice for more than $8 million. That's according to reporting from Politico. All this for unpaid taxes for Justice and his wife dating back to 2009. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser said today she will not seek a fourth term. Bowser has struggled a bit to navigate relations with the Trump White House and its desire to be more involved in parts of the city, including law enforcement and beautification. Bowser's been largely cooperative, and that has kept in line plans to build a new $3.7 billion football stadium and entertainment complex for the Washington Commanders. All this on the site of the old RFK Stadium. Bowser will leave office January 2027. French prosecutors say 4 more people have been arrested in last month's jewel heist at the Louvre. The suspects, 2 men, 2 women, between 31 and 40 years old. Their role in the theft, a bit unclear. Also mystifying, the whereabouts of the missing jewels, valued at more than $100 million. We'll return now to our political panel. Vedant Patel, former State Department spokesman for the Biden administration. Kevin Sheridan, long-standing and well-regarded Republican strategist, former RNC spokesman. Both. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I want to get to several things on the domestic front, but first, any thoughts you might have, and Vedant, I will start with you, about what we saw today in Ukraine, peace negotiations, Moscow, and the like.
Look, I think we have to take a little bit of a step back here, and I'll evoke not even a Democrat, but another Republican, Senator Mitch McConnell, who was very clear over the past couple of days that the United States, in the context of Ukraine, in the context of what's happening right now, should not and is not a neutral arbiter in this. And I think President Trump, Secretary Rubio, all of these guys have been acting as such, and I think that's incredibly problematic. Russia is the country that invaded Ukraine. Ukraine is the country that is fighting for its survival. It's really as simple as that. We all want to see this war end. We all want to see this come to a close, but it needs to have Ukraine at the table, and they really need to be the ones in the driver's seat about how this should all play out, not the United States and not Russia.
Kevin?
Well, we weren't a neutral arbiter with Israel and Hamas, so I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think he's sending in Witkoff again to rescue a peace deal. And look, if this group can't do it, it probably can't be done. And we know Vladimir Putin's going to be very tough to get to peace on this. But
how about
they're close? They're very close.
How about the lever that the president has always had, which is to turn to Congress and say, you have a sanctions package, you have the votes, go ahead so I can prove to Putin I mean what I say about pressure to come.
Well, hasn't the problem with sanctions been that they just turn to China and the BRIC nations and get around them?
Brazil, Russia, India, China.
It's splitting Russia and China is probably a bigger threat, than anything right now. But yeah, sanctions are on the table. Trump has mentioned them. He might go back to them if he's not getting what he wants out of Putin. But look, if these guys can't do it, I don't think it can be done.
Kevin, I want to talk to you about the Obamacare tax credits. The White House yesterday, it sounded like, and much of the reporting, ours and others, were they were preparing to announce something. Then came a call from the House Speaker, Mike Johnson. White House, don't move. My membership is not interested in this issue. Back off. And appears, at least for the moment, the White House has backed off. How do you evaluate all that?
Yeah, they're in a tough spot here because...
Who is? The House or the White House?
All Republicans everywhere because, 15 years ago, Democrats broke health care, made it not affordable for premiums, not affordable for deductibles. They're in a really tough spot. They keep having to bail this program out. We're going to have to do it again somehow before they make major changes to the program because it's fundamentally broken. That's just the facts. And I don't think Donald Trump or any red state Republican that's got a lot of people on Medicaid is going to, in the end, want that to, crater rural hospitals and care for their constituents, because a lot of them are on Medicare, and they're going to have to find some sort of solution, but it's not easy.
Vida, you heard the Kentucky governor say on this program not a few minutes ago, it's not just this issue, it's what happened in the big bill.
Absolutely.
President says beautiful and otherwise, but he says there are implications for that quite separate from this, and you put them together, it's a hurting.
Totally. This is also a president who, and a White House, candidly, that has attempted, at least over the course of the 24 campaign, to make affordability the centerpiece of their economic message, and perhaps rightfully so. But I think the bigger issue here is that most Americans who have to use the exchange, who have to use the Affordable Care Act, find it beneficial. Most Americans really rely on these subsidies to help get them across their monthly budgets, across the finish line. And really, we got to find ways to make healthcare, groceries, all of this stuff more affordable, and these tax subsidies are a key way of doing that. We can have debates about other healthcare systems and mechanisms, sure, but these subsidies are lifelines to people across this country, people who probably voted for this president.
And Kevin, to your point from a moment ago, I covered Obamacare as it went through Congress every step of the way. I covered what it was promised and everything. And it increased those who were covered, but it did not address the cost of that coverage. Republicans have had many, many times to legislatively craft something else, and yet they haven't. It's a 15-year track record of opposition, but no alternative. When will the day come that Republicans have not only an alternative that fits on a piece of paper, but they can find the votes for in both chambers?
You're not wrong, but it is the Democrats' health care plan, and it's Republicans just haven't had an idea of what to do about getting market forces into it, driving down the costs, and doing anything that's sustainable. So they keep just having to throw money at the problem. It doesn't help that we have 20 to 50 million people here illegally that take advantage of our hospitals and Medicare system. So look, there's a really tough problem. Get more people out of the country, I think, is one answer. But yeah, there's
immigration crackdowns.
Yeah.
If over the course of the past 15 years, there's not really been a better alternative to the Affordable Care Act, I think that that speaks volumes about just how
Does that speak volumes about the power of insurance companies or about the difficult policy choices you have to make?
I think both. I think there are difficult policy choices to be made.
And the insurance companies are very powerful.
And certainly insurance companies.
Because they have all the incentive structure to maintain Obamacare as it is.
But this is a system that, as you said, it has expanded coverage. It has helped save lives. It has helped Americans out who otherwise would have to pay thousands and thousands of more out of pocket for basic medical services. And so what really we need to do is figure out how are we going to make these things more affordable, starting with the subsidies, but also just these downstream healthcare costs.
Very quickly, yes or no? Do you think this gets resolved before the end of the calendar year?
Yeah, before the deadline.
Before December 31st.
I think they're going to have to at least bridge something for temporary.
I sure hope so, because shutdowns are bad for everybody.
But that's not a shutdown question. It's an ACA extension question.
Yeah. Look, I hope so.
Okay.
I hope so.
Shutting down Medicare would be a problem.
Kevin Sheridan, thank you very much. We're staying here, Guy? Right here. Okay, very good. Breaking down the hidden jargon and lingo of casino workers, sommeliers, and London cabbies. That sounds like a lot. There's a guy who can do it. Ben Schott joins me next with more in his new book about the secret languages we all share. You're watching and enjoying The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. If you watch this show each night, and if you do, thank you very much, odds are you know that we celebrate catchphrases and political jargon here. Lucky for us, a new book delves into the arcana of language, and it's so much more than words. Here's some of my conversation with best-selling author Ben Schott on his new book, Schott's Significa. Ben Schott cannot write an inelegant sentence. True?
Well, I mean, it's the London Times, and who am I to dispute the London Times?
I wouldn't if I were you. So the book, Schott's Significa, we should underscore, as I know you will, that's not a word.
No, it's not.
Significa. Schott's your last name, but Significa is not a word. But that's the point.
It's not in the OED.
Right. Oxford English.
Sorry,
Dictionary.
Oxford English Dictionary, yes.
Thanks, everyone. Should it be?
Well, I'm hoping it might be now. I'm quoted
You've given
once,
it propulsive quality.
I'm quoted once in the Oxford English Dictionary. I mean, and my hero, P.G. Wodehouse, was quoted, I think, 1,600 times, and he has 26 first cited usage. And that's the key, to be the person who brings a new word in. So that would be an honor.
The point of this book and all of your work, previous ones, miscellanea. Miscellanea?
Yep, sure.
Significa means it's better.
Yes,
right?
of course.
You've moved up.
I have. It's
in the
larger,
world.
heavier.
Right, it's larger,
better.
heavier, it's more fulsome.
Yeah.
Is that language exists all sorts of places.
Exactly.
It exists in gestures, eye contact, physicality, graffiti, emojis, all around us.
Yeah.
Walk me through some of the things that most fascinate you about that truth.
So this is a collection of 53 secret languages, but it could be a collection of 5,000 if I had the time and enough paper. We are surrounded by languages, and we often interact with systems that we don't understand. So if you go to a bar, the bartenders have their own slang. If you go to a restaurant, sommeliers have their own slang. We're in a TV
My
studio.
control room has its own slang. We have a whole TV slang about editing and everything else, which is in here.
So we have the hand signals of TV floor managers. Right. So if I get that, I know one thing, and if I get that, I'll speak for longer.
There's one that's unique to me.
Which is? I find that hard to believe.
It's true.
But the joy of this and researching is, it's this notion that everyone communicates in their own language. And if you could walk a mile, and if you could talk a mile in someone else's shoes, you really get to understand them. And significant is anything. It's almost an exercise in empathy. So I thought I was a pretty good coffee shop customer. I tried to be a good coffee shop customer. There's a section I researched on the language of Starbucks. I'm a much better coffee shop customer now, because you realize far more. I never worked in a coffee shop, and you realize it's like how to be a better customer. Because put an example, if you're not a good customer, you might get the decaf surprise. Right. The decaf surprise is it's like this coffee has no caffeine in it. So, you know, you realize how to order better. You realize the order they want, and you just realize like they've heard that joke 1,000 times. I mean, you know, if your card doesn't register, it's like, well, maybe it's free. You know what? No. Nobody wants to hear that for the 400th time that week. So it's this realization that language and gesture unlock something about the reality of life. So there's a section on the language of graffiti writers. I now see in London and New York, I see graffiti in a completely different way. I understand the hierarchy, I understand how difficult it was, I understand the placement. Graffiti is like a private, street art is designed to impress us. Murals, graffiti is a private conversation between graffiti writers, and we just ignore it. And you can kind of overhear it once you begin to see the same names popping up and the same styles, and you understand what was done in a hurry, what took a lot of time. It's an amazing unlock.
We love politics on this show. You have sanitized political language and meanings and language, but you also have either radicalized or revolutionary kind of political symbolism, language, and the like.
Absolutely. So everything from QAnon all the way to V for Victory and the anarchist symbol, the alphabet of political protest. But there's also a selection on the political hand signals and gestures. So, you know, Angela Merkel famously has the Merkel rhombus, but it's the way she could sort of stand and sort of hold herself.
Self-balance herself.
Self-balance, but also that became the Merkel rhombus became the symbol of her party, just that shape became the symbol. And then also you have what used to be called the Clinton thumb, which is now the fist, because pointing in politics is considered aggressive and rude. But if you do this, and the thumb on top of it. And of course, you can do this. If you want to be a bit more congenial, there's this. There's the horizontal fist. And you realize we're surrounded by, you know, Tony Blair famously, the difference between this and this. If you wanted to, like, this was to define it and this was to, like, bring it in. And once you start unpicking it and you realize there are structures and hidden codes in everything.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report is coming up next.